All right, welcome everyone. I see people joining. It's great to see all of you. We are going to be talking about, this is our AI series, webinar series, and we're going to be talking about college and career and how AI may be affecting the industry and college and such for our students. Glad you all are here. As you're coming in, since we are speaking about college and career, and many of us work in an educational setting and also have professional lives, let us know, how do you use AI in your work life? So we'd love to hear. Maybe we'll get some great ideas from some of you in regards to how you are using AI in your work life. I see some familiar faces. I see a couple of new faces. Glad you all are here. Oh, Kelly from Fresno. I am in Clovis right now, so I'm right next door to Fresno. Only used it a couple of times. That is fine. Absolutely. A newbie, okay, no problem. If you are new to AI and are looking for some tips on ways to use it in your professional life, you will receive an email with this recording as well as the recordings of all our other sessions. And there was one about using AI to help you as an educator for various purposes and helping with your workflow. So definitely something you might want to check out in the future. I see some people using Grammarly, ChatGPT. Awesome. I like how you're saying to ask if it has suggestions for improvement, not doing all the work for you. Excellent. Creating images. I have been doing the same, Scott. What is your favorite image generator? I have so far, lately I've been using Leonardo because though I love Adobe Firefly, I run out of credits very quickly. So I know there's DALL-E, but then you have to pay for GPT-4. I know that Google's Gemini has image generation now, I believe, if I am correct. I haven't explored that too much yet. Awesome. We've got some Central Valley people here today. Stockton, excellent. Some people with very little knowledge of AI, that is absolutely okay. Making assessments, absolutely. Sora, I have not used Sora yet. I've, of course, seen it all over the news. See some Gemini. Brisk, I'm not familiar with Brisk. All these new things for me to, everything's moving so quickly. So many things to check out. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for letting us know what you're using in regards to AI. Now I have some more tools that I definitely need to check out. So thank you for that. And let's go ahead and get started. So if you're not already aware, if you look at this bit.ly here, on our website for CDE, we do have AI guidance. We were actually the second state in the United States to come out with AI guidance. And so there are resources there, and all of these webinars are based off of those topics. And so just wanted to let you know that that's there. If you don't have time to take a picture or write down that bit.ly, don't worry. You will receive an email within the next couple of days. And so all of these links will be there as well. All right, excellent. So we have a couple of guest speakers here today. I'm so excited that we have brought from industry that have experience with students that are entering career, and we have conversations about college and such as well. And so we're really looking at how is AI impacting college and career, and how might we prepare our students? So that's kind of our essential question today that we're going to be looking at. My name is Catherine Goyette. I am the computer science coordinator for California's Department of Education, and am so excited to be here with you today to listen and learn from our speakers in a moment. Our AI guidance really talks about both learning with AI and learning about AI. And so we do believe as our Department of Education that it's important that we safely find ways to engage our students and educators in learning with AI, but also that we learn about AI, because the more we learn about it, the more informed we can be, the more safe we can be in utilizing this technology. All right. So this webinar series is based on that guidance that we have. And so we do believe it's important to utilize AI in schools to enhance academic learning in all of our content areas, that's something that can be done in a safe way. And so one of the reasons we believe that that is important is because AI is here. And we want to make sure that our students are college and career ready. And so that's why we are bringing in a couple of speakers today to talk about what does that mean for our students? How can we ensure with the presence of AI that we are preparing them for that college and career readiness in today's world? All right, so AI is impacting the present. How this looks like a pretty old picture, not so much like the present. I don't see any Teslas in here, but AI is absolutely in our world. I can actually track, it's a little creepy, but because of AI, it's collecting all sorts of data and making predictions, and I can track where my husband is right now because he's driving in our Tesla. So it's a little creepy, right? So there's a lot of things we need to think about with artificial intelligence. And I did want to just share some quick information from the World Economic Forum from January 2023. So this was a year ago. And the prediction is that 1.1 billion jobs will be likely radically transformed within the next decade from AI. And that the skills of the workplace of the future that are being called for: artificial intelligence and machine learning, cloud computing, product management, social media. And so if that is the case, as K-12 educators that are not AI experts, what might we do? And let's hear about what predictions and what we can do to help support our students. All right, so we're going to start with Antoine Picard from Google. He's got some great information to share with us and has done a lot of work working with students to try and support them in working in the tech industry, so to speak. And really, Antoine's going to do a better introduction of all of his what he does and how he can support us himself. So without further ado, we thought we'd bring in someone from a large tech company to let us know what in K-12 we should be aware of and how we prepare our kids. So Antoine, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll move on with your slides here.
Sounds good. Thank you, Catherine. So my name is Antoine Picard. I'm a software engineer at Google. I've been at Google for several years now, nearly 20. But I'm a strange kind of software engineer where currently I lead a team of engineers who works on knowledge management, that is ensuring that Google engineers have the information they need to do their job at their fingertips as they're doing their job and need that information. But prior to that, I've been very involved in a lot of higher education work, particularly the transition between higher education and early career. So that's the background that I bring to this talk. So we're talking about AI and Gen AI in particular. And ever since ChatGPT came out, it feels like everybody, both in the educational world, but also in the professional world, wants to say they're doing Gen AI. But I am really dubious of doing Gen AI as an expression, because really Gen AI has many parts. And a lot of people are just hitting one part and pretending that that's the whole of Gen AI. So I really want to call out three different parts of Gen AI to consider. One are the ethics and limitations of Gen AI, which is a really important topic that really can be broached with any audience that you might consider, from very early in the K-12 all the way through to professional career. These are important topics that really everybody, not just software engineers, need to be aware of. Then there's Gen AI as a tool, because Gen AI can be used for many purposes. And really, Gen AI as a tool is actually a huge bucket, I think bigger than the other two buckets on this slide. And really, that is where I will spend most of my time in this presentation today. But I also want to call out that a very important part of Gen AI is also the tool makers, the software engineers that are being both working on Gen AI today, but also the future software engineers that are in K-12 today and will go on to do computer science career and build the tools of the future using Gen AI. That is also an important topic. That is also part of doing Gen AI, but I will spend less time talking about that today. So I'm going to go deep into GenAI as a tool. And actually, I'm going to contradict myself and say that GenAI is not a tool. I feel like GenAI is a kind of tool. A lot of people talk about the calculator and how it's sort of becoming a prevalent tool changed math education in particular. But I think even though a calculator can be used for many things, I actually think GenAI is a broader kind of concept than a tool. Perhaps more like the small motors and batteries that make power tools, handheld power tools possible. I feel like GenAI is like a motor that can be applied to different kinds of tool to make them better, faster, more productive. So certainly GenAI can be used for search. It could be used for composing emails or composing essays or other documents. It could be used for doing math. It could be used for image creation. We already saw several examples of that in the chat today. So thank you for suggesting that. And it can also be used for coding, which is one particular use of GenAI that is particularly relevant to my work. But really, this is just scratching the surface. There are just so many applications of GenAI. So I think it's important to really keep this broad view of GenAI as a general tool. So calculators, I got to mention calculators just because that's such an obvious analogy that a lot of people like to use about GenAI. It's also near and dear to my heart because sort of this calculators becoming more widespread is something that happened when I was in high school. And so I definitely lived through that as a student. But I also want to call out that even though, the naysayer said, oh, well, will you be carrying a calculator in your pocket every day? Well, yes, I am. And yet, I don't know about you, but I don't use my calculator very often because even though calculators became available, I feel like the spreadsheet, it was actually a much more powerful application of the calculator as a concept. And it's one that is widely used now in K-12 and in college and certainly in the professional life as well. And I think that in many ways, we don't yet know what the spreadsheet of GenAI is going to be. And that's one of the challenges that we face in trying to make predictions about the future of GenAI. And that's a concept that we'll get back to as we continue this talk. So next slide, please. So repeated slide because the first part of the question for this talk is how is GenAI affecting the life of professionals? And in all these ways that I already mentioned, all these tools are already being used by professionals, as you reflected yourselves in the chat. People are using GenAI to write emails for work. People are using GenAI to search for information, search for quotes that they want to use in a presentation, do calculations, whatever it might be, do image creation as well. Absolutely, these are all things that are already happening pretty much all over the place in industry. And then I mentioned coding as one concept that I particularly care about. And I wanted to mention very quickly, if you take it to the next slide, Catherine, that GenAI is very good at coding. This is a screenshot from the code editor that is most commonly in use at Google. And the concept is really powerful here. I've typed 7 characters of a line of code that I was going to write, and the GenAI agent not only completes my line for me, it actually suggests the next, I didn't count them, like 8 or 10 lines of code that I was going to write next can be all suggested to me by the tool, and with a single tab, I can get that code in my program. This is hugely powerful, a huge time saver. Now, of course, the tool doesn't always get exactly the code that I want produced, but when it doesn't, I can still accept the suggestion and then go and edit it, and it still ends up saving me time. Now, I'm not allowed to go into the specifics, but this is a tool that's widely in use at Google, and a large percentage of the code that was written by Google software engineers last year was generated by GenAI in this way, corresponding to many millions of dollars of productivity gain. And we're expecting that number to grow in 2024 and beyond. So huge impact on software development. Next slide, please. Now, I also want to acknowledge that there are companies out there that are saying no to GenAI or actively forbidding their employees from using it. And this comes from a variety of concerns. One of them is legal. There are potential copyright issues. That's something companies are particularly sensitive to. At the same time, I feel like the tools are getting better, and there are some interesting efforts to try to get around these legal concerns. Somebody already mentioned Adobe Firefly. That's an image generation tool where Adobe themselves guarantees that all the images that are used for training their model are correctly licensed so that it can be used for generating new images. I think that's a really powerful model, and I expect there will be other agents for other purposes that will make similar guarantees in the future, because that's a way to overcome the concerns of certain companies. But for people who are able to use GenAI, the early adopters, if you will, there are still some concerns. One big one is Gen AI gets, no, sorry, you were okay to go to the next slide. Gen AI gets things wrong sometimes humorously so, as this slide illustrates. But we can have a good laugh about it. There are more serious concerns. Next slide, please. Sometimes Gen AI gives us an answer that is close to correct, but confusingly so. And that is problematic in a professional setting. This is an example that's actually several months old already. So don't try today because ChatGPT has gotten better and we'll get this right now. But it used to be that you could ask it to generate a program to solve a pretty simple mathematical equation in Python, and it correctly generates the code to compute this equation in Python, and then gives you a result that is just wrong. That is not, 17 is not the result of this calculation. And of course, ChatGPT can't run the Python, so it can't verify that output is correct. But this is a big problem in a professional settings. If the suggestion is wrong, you can get wrong outputs. So professionals are having to develop new skills or further strengthen skills they already had in terms of verifying the output of these tools to make sure that they actually meet their needs. There's also a cultural shift associated with this, where we found, particularly for people who are relatively new to programming, that they really struggle with finding bugs sometimes because they just assume that the code that was suggested by an agent must be correct. The computer can't be wrong. So if the computer suggested this code, it must be correct. Therefore, the bug must be in my code, which is this 2 lines of code next to these 12 lines that was generated by the agent. And I can't figure out the bug. Well, the bug is just in the code that was generated by the agent, but the coder just assumed that it was correct when it was not. So this is something to watch out for. Back to other kinds of legal concerns. I don't know if you saw the story, but there was an incident that was in the news recently because a tribunal made a ruling in Canada. There was a customer of Air Canada who was chatting with what turned out to be a chatbot about getting a discount for a bereavement flight. And based on that chat, decided to take a flight, paid a lot of money for it, and then asked for a reimbursement, which the airline was not willing to give because turns out the chatbot made up a policy about bereavement flights that was not actually their policy. And the company tried to argue that it should not be held liable for what its chatbot said. And the courts found that not to be the case and forced them to pay compensation to the customer. I think if you're going to unleash AI, you got to be careful about these kinds of interactions. You want to be careful that the output that is being produced is correct. Now, this is where I started making my transition from the corporate world to the educational world, because this is a concept that I feel applies to both in slightly different ways, but still is important. I'm sure you've all used GPS navigation, either on your cell phone or in your car, if your car is equipped with it. And I don't know if you've noticed, but for myself, I've become keenly aware that if one of my friends has moved and I go to their new place, depending on how well I know the area, if I use GPS, I can get to the place where they live without actually having learned how to get to their place. And I only realize this the next time I'm trying to get to their place and realize I need to use the GPS again to get back to it because I have no idea how I got there the first time. And this is a concept that is not new. It applies to other technologies like navigation system and Google Maps. But Gen AI, in making us more productive, presents more opportunities for us to overlook certain steps that took us to get to where we were going without us realizing we took those steps because Gen AI took them for us. And so this is a problem in the corporate world where employers need to be conscious of what are the skills that they actually want their employees to have to bring to their job, and are the tools shortcutting these skills so that they're not developing them. I think they need to be very conscious about that. But of course, this also applies very much in the education space, and we'll start with higher education, where as these tools become available, including the auto-completion from code that I mentioned earlier, professors need to be really deliberate about what are the skills that they're trying to give their students and they want them to develop. What are the muscles they're trying to make strong, as opposed to it's okay for the student to jump from point A to point B because the interesting part of the lesson is actually from point B to point C. You can't just assume that the right thing is going to happen. You have to be very deliberate about what steps you're skipping. So the advent of these tools is causing a lot of stress in higher education. Next slide, please. And privately, a lot of department chair will tell you they're totally freaking out because all this change is happening, and they would prefer to be in charge of when the change is happening, but this is one case where the change is kind of happening to them, whether they want to or not. And they are reacting in different ways. Certain universities are prohibiting the use of Gen AI tools altogether. Others are trying to mitigate some of its negative impacts while still embracing it. Next slide, please. So I have some examples from computer science where different computer science departments are trying different things to try to get their students to either not use ChatGPT or be or have visibility in how they're using ChatGPT. So one example that I'm not a big fan of is certain schools are requiring their students to handwrite the code that they're submitting for assignments. This seems ridiculous to me. No professional software engineer hand writes code, so why should we make students do this? This seems a little silly to me. In other settings, the students write the assignment and then are required to add a video to their submission in addition to the program, walking the professor through the code that they've written, explaining why they've written that code. And that, I think, is pedagogically more interesting. I'm not sure it's a great use of time, but I think it's at least interesting as a way to get around that. And then the slider that I have a screenshot of there is another way to go about it, which is requiring the students to not just submit the code that they've written, but actually the whole session in their code editor, which includes the ability to use this slider to go back in time and see how the code was created over time. And it makes it really easy to see if a big part of the code was just pasted all at once, or also if the code was written from line 1 sequentially to line 1000 or whatever it might be. That is not the way code is written. Code is written in nonlinear fashion. You go back and forth, and you can detect some irregularities using a tool like that. These are ways to mitigate plagiarism, which I understand the need for, but I think it's also overlooking the opportunity to actually use Gen AI as part of the learning process. Next slide. And so I have an example here of a curriculum from Professor Malik from the Wharton School of Business, who has embraced Gen AI in his classroom. And so this is part of the curriculum, laying out the AI policy, sort of taking its face on, recognizing that this is going to be something that the students are going to use, and being specific about what they can and cannot do, and also saying that there are some parts of the course that will require them to use AI, which I think is a much more positive way of taking this on. Next slide. Another thing that I want to mention is, it's easy to forget, but not so long ago, people struggled to know how to make Google searches. For example, how tall is he? Who's the he in that query? Or another one that I don't know if you remember, but people would add please and thank you to their search query, which is really polite of them. I really appreciate that. But it meant that Google would try to find search results that included the word thank you or the word please, which was not usually what the user was trying to do. Now, Google has gotten better at that and will often ignore those words if appropriate. But knowing how to build good Google searches was not an obvious thing, and students had to learn this back 15 years ago or so. And the same thing is now happening with Gen AI, where it's tempting to say, oh, write me a 5-page essay on Christopher Columbus, and boom, there you have a 5-page essay on Christopher Columbus. Sure, but what you got is probably a pretty bad 5-page essay on Christopher Columbus. And this is called prompt engineering. How do you build the way you ask Gen AI a question to get a really high quality result? I saw earlier in the chat, Obi mentioned using ChatGPT as an editor for a paper. That is another way to use ChatGPT that I think is really different from just a one-sentence question and expecting a good answer. Next slide. I also want to mention there are some tools that are using Gen AI as a teaching tool, like Kanmigo, which is what this icon is for. I think there's a lot of potential there for other tools to be developed to not give students the answer to a question that they're asking, but to guide them to the answer the same way a good TA might do. And I think this is going to come in the higher education space, but also the K-12 space. And I think this is a huge potential gain for students and for teachers alike. I also want to acknowledge, I didn't have a good picture of the digital divide, so I used the continental divide as an illustration instead. The digital divide is a problem that we're facing already, and Gen AI, because it's a tool that makes us more productive, could make the digital divide worse if these tools that make students more productive are not available to underrepresented groups across our country. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that and take on the challenge of making sure that Gen AI is equally available to all students. All right, I want to get back to my spreadsheet analogy, because now that we're transitioning to the K-12 space, I want to acknowledge that I'm not here to tell you, oh, you really should teach your students how to use Gemini, because I represent Google, so that's what I've got to say. Again, we don't know what the future applications of Gen AI that your students will be making 10, 15, 20 years from now, because this is a technology that's evolving. So really, we should focus on the fundamentals of the kinds of powers that these tools give us, and go from there. Next slide. And so the first step to doing that is to put on your own mask before assisting others. I'm really happy to see so many of you already using AI in different ways in your professional life, in your classroom. You should continue to do that. And for those of you that aren't doing it yet, try playing with Gemini and ChatGPT and Firefly and all these tools, because it's important for you to know what those tools are capable of. It might also inspire you to find interesting ways to use it in the classroom. And I've got a couple of examples here that I wanted to go through quickly. This is a 5th grade classroom where the teacher uses Find the Bot, where the students are assigned writing a text about Muhammad Ali, and then the teacher also asks ChatGPT to write a similar assignment, and then has the student try to guess which one was written by the chatbot or which one was written by one of their peers. Pretty simple, but kind of a fun way to include ChatGPT in the classroom, or Bard, or Gemini, or whatever it might be. Next one. This one I thought was interesting. It was middle school case where this English teacher is actually helping her students use ChatGPT to prepare them for exams in other subjects that they're taking, where she's guiding them through having ChatGPT generate information and then using that for them to practice and review the information in the classroom. I think that's a really fascinating use case. My point is, there's a lot of different examples out there for you to find. You can use Gemini or Google search to find other examples of ways that Gen AI is already being used in the classroom, and be inspired by them. Because fundamentally, next slide, I think the challenges that Gen AI brings to the classroom are not really new. These are already problems that other technologies have already brought with them, from Google to Wikipedia to the myriad of social media that are available to students. And my call to action for you today is to continue doing what you've already been doing to a certain extent, which is to teach students to be good digital citizens in this very connected world that we live in now. There's a lot of misinformation available to them, and they have to use their judgment. They have to build their judgment, and they have to become skeptical to identify what is good information and what is not. And Gen AI is just another example of this. There will be good information, good productivity from Gen AI. There will also be misinformation and just generally bad content available from Gen AI. And so I would encourage you to learn about Gen AI so you can continue to be good guides to your students in being educated and smart citizens of this digital economy. And that's where I'm wrapping up. And
awesome. Thank you. I was looking for the unmute button when you're sharing screen. It's always in a different spot, right? Thank you. Thank you so much, Antoine. It's great to hear. I think, when we're talking about AI, I think you ended by just talking about the fact that as educators, we're trying to teach our kids to think, to make good decisions, to be good digital citizens, right? And so I think that yeah, we don't know what's all going to happen in the future, but really it's about our humanity, right? So I really appreciate that. I appreciate hearing a little bit of what's happening in the industry. I love your idea that which we also talk about a bit in the guidance as well, that the first step is for you as an educator to start learning, just playing and learning about this stuff, right? A little bit. And especially due to the fact that right now there's not there's not a lot of free FERPA, COPA compliant Gen AI tools for students yet, right? There's a limited amount. And so, but I know you work for Google, and I'm sure you can't tell me even if you know the answer to this, but my prediction is that very soon there will be a lot more safe, safe legally compliant in regards to data privacy tools for
I can
students.
honestly tell you that I have no idea whether Google is doing anything in that space. But I mentioned the Adobe Firefly example before, and I think that there
Yeah.
will be more coming in a similar vein.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's a bit now. I mean, you can go into Canva. Students can use Canva for text to image and things like that. So yeah, really, really appreciate all of that. Please keep in mind, everyone, that you can ask questions in the chat. You can have comments in the chat as well. Really appreciate the comments in there. And I want to. I heard you talk about Antoine about the digital divide and the need to make sure that our students are exposed to all of this, especially for our underrepresented populations. And I'm so excited that we have Allison Scott with us here today from KPOR Center. And I know she really has a heart for increasing access to technology and STEM for our underrepresented students. And so I'm interested to hear your take, Allison, on how we can ensure that what does this AI thing mean for our students in regards to college and career? So when you are ready, if you want to share screen, introduce yourself, and we're just so excited that you are here. Both of you bring such a wealth of knowledge in different parts of the industry, so we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kat. Thanks for having me. Thank you all for joining. And Antoine, it was great to sit here and learn from you as well as I was just preparing to come on. But lots of great concepts that I learned from you also. So it's wonderful to join this call and share a little bit about our work at the KPOR Center. There's me. And it's also been a pleasure to work alongside Kat and the leaders at CDE for many years on computer science equity. So we're really excited about conversations about AI and the future of education in our state, and really, really grateful for you all hosting this conversation and for so many of y'all to show up and engage. And I should also mention that I am recovering from a cold. So if anything that I say doesn't make sense, just blame the cold medicine and not me. So a little bit about the KPOR Foundation. So this is a picture of our building. We're located in downtown Oakland, California. Our overall mission is to create a more equitable technology ecosystem that addresses longstanding racial inequality, creates economic opportunity, tackles critical societal issues, and reflects the power and perspectives of communities of color. What we do at the foundation, we conduct research. We've actually conducted a couple years of research with CDE data on the state of computer science in California. We make strategic grants to organizations that are working to advance access and equity in computer science education and in pathways to tech jobs. We support policy change, and we also invest in startup companies that are looking to tackle solutions through technology. So as you can see from that background, we kind of bring an orientation, as you should say, to this work. And we're very interested in kind of both understanding the macro level trends of what's happening in technology, what's happening in AI, as well as how does this translate into activities and actions that we can take at the classroom level, at the district level, at the state level, and across our country. So a little bit just to start about the AI landscape, which you all seem very familiar with in terms of your familiarity with many of the tools. I just want to start out by saying what we've seen, it's probably an understatement, what we've seen over the past year and a half has been just a huge amount of attention, a huge amount of resources, a lot of things have been upended, and some would say, we have great opportunity to rethink the ways that we're thinking about almost every industry. So from a technical side, we see the headlines about GPT-4 being able to pass medical exams and the bar exam. So what does that actually mean for these exams that are supposed to create gateways into certain careers? We also see across the sector that there is just a ton of resources flowing into AI-related companies. So this is very much like an economic trend that is important to pay attention to, because that will then have implications for all other aspects of our lives. Most recently, the OpenAI valuation of $80 billion is huge. And to think about who the backer of OpenAI is and what that means for how we're thinking about the space, how we're thinking about the role of industry, the role of, you know, just massive corporations and driving our access to tools. And then what we are also really interested in addressing are a good amount of information that we've seen over the last 5+ years around the potential harms of algorithms, right? So are we paying enough attention to the potential promise of how we can use AI, how we can use generative AI to solve complex problems, but also just to make our lives easier? While we're doing that, are we paying enough attention to potential risks and risks that are impacting most marginalized communities? So everything from medical algorithms to facial recognition software to algorithms used by banks to determine whether you're eligible for a home loan have been shown to be biased by race and gender. In the AI in education landscape, which we are all very familiar with, I think a couple trends. So one, I just pulled the document from the Department of Education. I think that just for me captures that there are so many of these toolkits coming out because everyone is trying to figure out, and CDE has put out some, everyone is trying to figure out, what does this mean for education? What are some guardrails we can put in place? How do we start to think about what the future of teaching and learning is? Which is really important and exciting, and we're still very much in the forefront of that. I thought this data on a recent survey was really interesting about student uses of AI, and I think that probably replicates the uses that you all just referenced at the outset of the presentation. So over 50% are using AI to help complete assignments or exams. Over 50%, which was actually surprising to me, have had coursework that requires them to use AI as part of their work. And really, really promising that 79% have said that they had at least one instructor discuss the importance of ethics, which, going back to Antoine's vision, I love the vision of like, that is the first point of entry that we have to be able to address with all of us. And I remember, like, at the outset, a lot of the conversations were around really like the fears of what the negative implications could be on students, and maybe less about what the potential upsides could be. Just one analysis was that cheating fears were a little bit overblown. And then I think there's another opportunity, which I'll talk a little bit more about, that we're very interested in, that we can provide to all young people in terms of how to investigate the biases that can be perpetuated in AI. So if we want to make, this is the argument that I'll make, if we want to make our AI systems, if we want to make our AI tools like truly equitable, part of that process would be encouraging all of our young people to deeply engage with these concepts, understand both the risks, the opportunities, the harms, and be able to create more innovative and more equitable solutions. So we, in January of this year, so you all are some of the first to hear about this, we released a new guide called the Responsible AI and Tech Justice Guide for K-12 Education. The purpose for releasing this guide, some of the things that I already said. So we know the landscape is rapidly evolving. Folks want to understand how to best harness this technology for good, as well as minimize risk and mitigate harm. We know that we've integrated topics of ethics and equitable concerns about AI into computing education, but we think that as we're talking about learning with AI and learning about AI, that we need to also clearly state that there is a need for us to have these conversations within AI education. And then a bold new vision, we think, about what these frameworks are about AI in education, and how they intersect with topics of justice, equity, are important. So we came up with a definition and a set of core components, which I'd love to show to you all. And we will be also developing a set of resources and case studies for utilization in classrooms. But more importantly, we're really interested in seeing like how educators are beginning to use concepts and like gathering more resources that can be shared more broadly with instructors across the state and the country. So our vision for what responsible AI and tech justice in K-12 education means would be a robust and comprehensive course of study that utilizes an explicit racial and social justice lens to equip all students with the knowledge and resources to critically interrogate the ethical and equitable development, deployment, and impacts of AI, while simultaneously challenging, disrupting, and remedying the harms that these technologies can produce within individuals' lives, communities, and society at large. Bit of a mouthful, but I think you see where we're going with this. And one thing that I think is really important to point out is that we look at this across K-12 education and across all disciplines. So this is not meant to be a core component of computer science education, but is really meant to be integrated throughout. And I think you'll see through the core components that there are lots of opportunities that you can think of engaging, the youngest students at the elementary school level, all the way to students who might be taking a philosophy course, a psychology course, a history course, and understanding some of the implications of AI. So we have 6 core components. One is to examine the AI technology creation ecosystem. So it's what I talk to my nephew about this stuff all the time. He knows what ChatGPT is, he knows what DALL-E is, but he has no idea what's behind the curtain of those technologies. And so I think, and he's 17. So I think that's just a really important place for us to start. So who's designing and developing the products? How are they developed? Who's investing in their creation? Who's benefiting from their adoption? Like, just understand the landscape and in order to be a more informed consumer of these technologies. The second is to interrogate the relationship between technology and human beings. So human-computer interaction, topics of values, ethics, privacy, and safety, which we think are really important as young people are engaging with these technologies even more. The third is explore the impacts and implications of AI technologies on society. So what are some of the positive benefits? What are some of the negative consequences? And how does marginalization potentially get perpetuated through some of these technologies? And you'll see the purpose of exploring the impacts early on will also be to help students think about how they might mitigate those impacts. So a few quick examples, or actually one deeper dive into the first one is like, what is this broader ecosystem? So I just took OpenAI, since OpenAI is kind of front and center for all of us. So it's currently backed at 80 billion. Sorry, it's currently valued at 80 billion. You can click on this article and see who some of the other investors are. Microsoft is one of the biggest investors. So I think it's like, that could be a whole lesson, a whole conversation. My nephew's in a business class. So I'm like, okay, you could have a whole set of conversations about that. And then also, what are the ethical dilemmas that have arisen in the last saga of OpenAI's leadership? So there are some really important ethical questions to consider, right? Like, is this a truly for-profit company? Does this company have any responsibility to the American public? Like, lots of questions that I think students would love to engage with beyond just how they use the tool ChatGPT, right? And then, like, who is creating the AI tools at ChatGPT, especially after they had 2 women on the board after the latest turmoil. They are led exclusively by wealthy white men at the stage. And I should say 2 of the women who were on the board were also very focused on like societal impacts of technology. So that's another set of questions, right? And then there was some other stories around their workforce practices. So using outsourcing workers in another country, paying them less than minimum wage to contribute to this overall success of their company. So just a couple examples. I'm sure you have many more, but there's lots of things that I think can lead to some really great questions and conversations with young people. And then the last 3, so interrogate personal uses of technology to become critical consumers of products and address misuse, exploitation, and safety concerns. We know that there has been a lot on digital literacy, but I think this is kind of the next level of digital literacy, so like critical AI literacy. And then build a critical lens in the usage, analysis, and interpretation and reporting of data. So this could be integrated through almost any math class I could imagine, and it could build some really interesting projects as well. And then lastly, but definitely not least, to minimize, mitigate, and eliminate harm and injustice caused by AI technologies through both the responsible and ethical creation process and individual and collective right to refusal. So again, just picking out on the becoming critical consumers of technology. We know about all of the headlines, especially if you are a parent or an educator and work with young people all day, every day. Nearly 1 in 5 teens say they're on social media or YouTube or TikTok almost constantly. We know that social media has been shown to be driving really negative trends related to mental health. And then there have been several different studies about the ability of young people to be able to identify fake news or and disinformation. And so there could be a number of different activities that could be utilized within classrooms just to have students start to reflect on their own use of technologies, why their social media feeds are giving them the content that it's giving them, how information echo chambers can be created, how that can lead to polarization, lots of interesting stuff. So just as I close and would love any questions, I haven't seen the chat just yet, but I will click on that. So this is the guide. It's available on our website. I'll also drop the link into the chat. But again, yeah, our hope is that this is a useful summary and way to think about the types of things that can be integrated into and across K-12 classrooms. The argument that we would make is, I think this is a critical component as we think about education. It's not just about the types of skills that students need, right? The like very specific types of technological skills that students will need. But back to Kat, what you said at the beginning, how are we teaching students to think? But how are we teaching them to think about these concepts that are going to be so incredibly important in impacting every aspect of their lives? And stay tuned. We want to make a set of grants to educators. So I'll make sure, Kat, you get that information to send out to a set of educators who just want to try things in the classroom. Like I just made up a couple things that I thought were interesting, but you all know your school communities and your students and families much better. So we definitely want to do a set of grants just to kind of spur thinking and excitement on these topics. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. Yeah, so I love the approach. What I heard from both you and Antoine just about like this is about humans and about people and us learning how to consider when we are utilizing this. Like I didn't hear anybody say we shouldn't use AI, right? So to speak, but like as we are engaged in this digital world and it's all around us, just making sure that we are aware of AI's limitations, that we are thinking of the potential benefits, but also what those risks might be. And the fact that, like Antoine said, AI is sometimes making new programmers think that they're wrong when in fact it might be the AI itself, right? Like those types of thoughts. And like you're saying, Allison, making sure that our students and educators alike are aware that there are some biases that we need to consider as well, particularly if our students find those, right? And that exacerbates what they're thinking and what their identities are, so to speak. So appreciate both of you and all of what you are adding to the conversations here. Love hearing both the like the technology industry side, and also I saw that Antoine, you talked a lot about like all sorts of industries that have AI. Like it's not just, and Allison, you did as well. So it's not just computer scientists, right? So I do see a question, Allison, about the guide that you have. So just make sure to send that to me and I can add it in the email that goes out to everyone. Please feel free, everyone, if anybody has any specific questions for our speakers, if you have any takeaways that you thought, wow, I hadn't thought about that, thanks for sharing. You can use the chat for that. I am going to share my screen again so that I can kind of let everyone know what to expect moving forward, but also some questions and answer time as well. So I see in the chat that we need to be trained in all of these areas, teaching in the community college system, feeling like we're not getting enough training. And I would say that it's all really new. And so I think even those of us that are like doing trainings, I believe are feeling like we're still learning also and starting to build trainings and things like that. I do like what Antoine said about having teachers just start to learn a little bit on your own first, because the more aware you are of how these things work, I use with teachers. I say, hey, look at what I tried on ChatGPT and what it told me. Like, let's talk about this, right? So absolutely, Amy, it's a lot of being brave and trying things. Absolutely. Oh my goodness, Darren, I'm doing trainings, but they're obsolete as soon as I do it. That's so true, right? We don't know what the future is going to hold. I think that critical AI literacy is really a great thing to think about. Let me go back here and I'll keep looking at Allison, I didn't know you had added those in there. 1 second. Let me move down here. Perfect. So still some time for some question and answers if people have them. All right. Thank you for your comments. It's definitely moving faster, moving very quickly right now, technology. I did want you all to know what our next steps at CDE are to support you. And so please know that all registrants are going to be sent an email within the next couple of days with links to the CDE AI resources that we were talking about, a PDF or actually a view-only link to this presentation, any resources that were mentioned, a feedback form, and the recording link will be sent via email once that is released as well. So awesome. So there will be webinars in March. This is, as you can see, the February offerings, but we are going to have I appreciate that. This was actually a great segue. I didn't even tell Antoine and Allison to do this, but you both mentioned like the digital divide in effect, and that's what we're talking about first in March. So once that is announced and we have our speakers confirmed, and I will be sure to and the date, I'll be sure to put that in the email for all of you as well. This information will be in the email also, but please, if you have not already, if you join our listserv at CDE, the computer science listserv, you will be up to date with all of the new AI resources and webinars that come down the pipeline from the department. And I always love connecting with all of you. So please feel free to do that as well. I'm seeing some thank yous for resources and for the conversations in the chat. So thank you to both Antoine and Allison for that. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here and for all that you do as well. So thanks and have a wonderful, wonderful day. I will stay on for a couple minutes in case people have additional questions or comments, but we appreciate you.